If you're going to be persuasive, whether you're selling a concept or you're selling a product or you're selling your service or you're selling on why you're better than your competition that they're already doing business with. One great story technique is what your happy customers say. And then there's also the how did you come up with the idea of what you created your company around? And this is when you do some time travel. If you're talking about your origin story, and origin stories are now very popular, almost buzzwordy, but take us to the garage, but take the audience. So, Jeff, I wish you could have been there.
Are you a scaling SaaS founder? Ready to make the leap from leading a team to leading an organization? Join us each week as we refill your think tank with actionable tips and strategies from great business minds you know and those who don't know yet. This is SaaS Fuel with your host, 5-time entrepreneur, SaaS founder, and globetrotting adventurer, Jeff Maines.
Welcome back to the SaaS Fuel podcast, where translating tech into story isn't dumbing it down, it's smartening it up so people actually get it and want more. I'm your host, Jeff Maines. I help B2B SaaS founders like you grow from traction to scale. Here, growth is more than just numbers. It's about crafting a future-proof company, premium valuation, and leaders who build a business of significance while living epic, adventurous lives. How much of your message actually sticks after you leave the room? Attention spans are shrinking, no doubt about it. And tech leaders are expected to inspire, inform, and influence all in under 10 minutes. Clear, compelling communication is no longer optional, and AI is not much help with that. Today, we're going to explore the real cost of cramming slides into a presentation the night before a big pitch, why memorized scripts kind of fall flat, and how a well placed personal story can do more than data ever could. Today is all about crafting presentations that don't just inform, they resonate. They don't just hit the head, they hit the heart also. From tightening your message to structuring content like a narrative, we'll break down how to speak with clarity, credibility, and connection. And this isn't just about being flashy or being a great presenter, it's about being heard. Whether you're addressing investors, leading a team, or speaking on stage, the ability to make your message memorable is one of the most underrated leadership skills, and probably double so in the tech world. If you're ready to trade jargon for storytelling, bullet points for buy in, and information for inspiration, this episode will show you how. Let's dive in. Our founder on Tuesday was Andrew Seidman, agency co founder and go to market strategist. He explained why growth isn't just about closing deals, it's about creating belief. From account based marketing and product led growth integration to brand first differentiation, Andrew laid out a new map for founders looking to scale smarter and, with a little more swagger. Our expert guest last week was Natalie Zacharin, fractional CFO and founder of Zacharin Consulting. She helped founders ditch financial chaos for clarity. She showed us how real time decision making, grit, and metric mastery, like CAC and LTV, are the keys to finding financial resilience and scaling on your own terms. If you missed either of those episodes, go back and check them out. Lots of gold in there. My guest today is Patricia Fripp, legendary speech coach, storytelling tactician, and advisor to executive sales teams and startup founders alike. With thousands of live keynotes, dozens of awards, and an arsenal of unforgettable one liners, Patricia reveals what it really takes to make your message land. Patricia gets real about the mistakes she's seen in startup pitches, sales decks, and conference keynotes. We've seen a lot of those, I'm sure. Plus, the dead simple structure that transforms even the most complex concepts into something compelling. Love it. Welcome, Patricia Fripp. Hey, Patricia, welcome to SaaS Fuel.
My pleasure to be with you.
You've trained Fortune 500 execs, entrepreneurs, and professional speakers. Why is it that communication skills are more essential now than ever, especially for leaders in tech?
Probably because we're so busy and we have to learn to speak to be remembered and repeated. And very often it's better to say less, say it well, in shorter sentences and phrases with pauses to give the audience, whether it's 1, 550 or 500, to think, that makes sense.
You built a career on mastering messaging. Why did you decide that expertise and then bringing that to the startup and SaaS world?
Well, let's begin with, in general, when people have to get their message across, they need to probably spend more time thinking about how to deliver it. Brilliant people know what they're talking about. However, very often they have to be more high level for one audience and more detailed audience for another. And sometimes they have everyone together. And the first lesson we always have to learn in communicating is, why would the other person care? I work on one premise. Everyone's more interested in themselves than they are in us.
True.
That means you can't do what traditionally years ago, sales presentations and trying to be persuasive, telling your story, followed a format. This is who we are. This is what we do. This is how long we've been doing it. This is who we've done it for. And we'd love to do it with you. Well, now, if you are having a serious conversation, the chances are you're well researched. So the whole way of communicating is different. And you, in the world of shorts and X and
Yes.
you talk about the attention span of a gnat. And here's another issue that I found with my clients. I frequently hear, we need to learn how to all tell our story or talk about a product the same way. There's no consistency. And also, we assumed, big mistake, we assumed because we only hire seasoned professionals who've been selling software for 10 years, they'd know how to tell our story. No, not unless you've trained them. This is
Right.
how we tell the story.
Yeah.
So that's just
What
a few of the frustrations.
Yeah, those are big. And telling the story is part art, part science. But yeah, if the founder or the leaders are not communicating that and passing it on and saying, here is the story, then how would they know? How do they know how to tell the story? They just kind of make it up on their own and do their best.
And
But
and
it
and
has
of
to be
course,
shared.
as you know, in Silicon Valley, most of the leaders come from a technical engineering background.
True.
And often I hear people say, "Oh, I'm a terrible speaker." I say, "No, you're not. You're an untrained speaker. You
Yes.
spent 15 or 20 years focusing on what you know better than anyone else. You spent no time thinking on, how do I communicate?" And so my job is to, of course, I always say, shy, modest, brilliant engineers, I have to turn them into corporate rock stars to be. And if you focus a little attention on it, it's not that hard. And there's another, I would say, flaw in how brilliant people speak. And it's interesting. There are words and phrases that people use, and it's in every company. It's I don't know if it's catching, but for example, I notice many brilliant people are now saying, we're going to kind of do this and sort of do this. And I say, you're going to do it or not. Speak in black and white, because I know you are confident. However, I don't know if you're trying to be modest, but if you use kind of and sort of this language, people think you're not confident, even if you are.
Right.
Everything we do, Jeff, adds to or distracts from our message.
What do you think the single biggest mistake it is that founders and executives make when they step in front of a room? And it could be a room of one, it could be a Zoom room, it could be live and in person. What do you think that is?
Based on my own personal experience, one, they leave the planning of what they're going to do to the last minute. A big
Yeah.
portion of my business is I help, and a lot of it is that the people are going to be delivering the breakout sessions at conferences. So whether they're live or they're pre-recorded or they're virtual, they leave it to the last minute. I said, well, let's start planning a month before. It's the day before.
Right.
One of my fabulous founders, he's one of my favorite clients, and I first worked with him when they got $40 million more in funding, and they said we have to up his profile. A wonderful, charming, wonderful man. But we're getting ready for a big conference. And the night before, they're changing the script. So one of the biggest mistakes is you don't begin early enough.
That's a big one for
Because
sure.
I know there's last minute information. However, there's so much you can prepare and just slot in if you want yesterday's statistics. But the framework and the opening, the building rapport, so much of it you can do in advance. And that's my biggest frustration. Because if you're reading off a teleprompter, and it's great, especially if it's up high, you're not looking down, but you still, it's not in your body. Even if you have a teleprompter, you still need to get, I believe, your message inside, get the rhythm. It's more than just the words. It's
Yes.
how you deliver the words. And if you pause for dramatic effect and the teleprompter keeps going at the same speed, now you got it just is not as effective as you deserve your good message to be, especially with your customers and prospects sitting in front of you.
It's true. I used to really resist having any kind of script and to have a framework or an outline and that kind of thing. But I thought scripts were too restrictive and thought it's going to take away. It's not going to be genuine. It's not going to be authentic if it's scripted. And that was completely wrong.
Well, yeah, the idea. So, in a perfect world, let's talk about a perfect world, which it isn't.
Sure.
But in a perfect world, if we had a month to work together, I would say, if you had, and I'm going to give you a case history of this, another of my favorite clients. I got a call, as I often do, help. The work you've done with our engineers and our leadership has been wonderfully well received. But as you know, we are a $2 billion software company with aspirations of being 20 billion. And we're getting ready for our big sales meeting, 1,500 salespeople from around the world at the Bellagio in Las Vegas. Now you're beginning to think how much this is going to cost them. And they say, we need everyone to know you are at the right place, right company at the right time, and our strategy is sound. And the problem was 40% of the audience was acquired. They bought
Wow.
their competition. So 40% of the people, if you've been acquired, you've had months of frustration not knowing who's your boss going to be. Am I going to have a job? Do I relocate? So it was not the happiest audience to go into. And they said, our president is brilliant. He's shy. He's modest. He's not a bad speaker. He's an engineer. We don't have any corporate rock stars in our company. We need you to write him his opening speech and turn him into a rock star. And
Mm.
4 hours.
Wow.
It's amazing, Jeff, the amount of times they say, we need to transform this man and write him a speech, 4 hours. And she said, he lives in Europe, but he will be here next week. And his American assistant said, "You'll be lucky if you get 2 hours." So I had no
Wow.
idea what they told him about me. So he walked in and he said, I said, "How do you do?" If you had one sentence rather than 45 minutes, what would you say? I'm
So
trying
good.
to get to the essence of the message. Because
Right.
what happens with a lot of these presenters, yeah, other people write their scripts for them. We need
Right.
to say this. So not only haven't they written it, it's usually copy and pasted from I said this reads well. It reads, but it sounds as if you pasted it in from a marketing brochure. People don't speak
Right.
like that. It's
Right.
written. The written word is for the eye. The spoken word is for the rhythm. So I said, if you had one sentence, he said, this is a brand new company. I said, great. And I said to his assistant who was taking notes, write that down. Welcome to a brand new company. Now, who
Mm.
decided it was going to be a brand new company? Well, with board of directors. Well, where were you? Well, we were, in Europe in our boardroom. And I said, who said what to whom? And he said, Arnold, who's been on the board for 10 years, said, how do we grab the market share once and forever? And I said, well, we could do this, that, or take the boldest move ever, which was buy our competition, which they did. And they're sitting in the audience. So what I do, Jeff, I conversationally bring out what they need to say. So you take a script out of what they conversationally say. And so you might have a script, but it's only to be able to read and get in your body. Then you
Right.
go from the script to the outline and the bullet points. And then he was talking about his strategy, how the company had changed the strategy. And I said, when was the first time you realized the importance of strategy? He said, when I was a 14-year-old ball boy before the French Open. And people came in to see the French Open. Well, obviously, what they were doing was entertaining people while they come in. So he said they didn't know they're going to watch a match of the ball boys. And I was playing against my best friend. We were equally matched as far as our experience and our talent. But his sister was our ball boy. And she wanted her brother to win. So she was sabotaging the way she threw the balls. So he said, Patricia, that's when I realized the importance of strategy. When
Ah.
you're equally matched and at a disadvantage. And I said, you have to say that. You have to tell them that story. And he said, were they interested? And this is the secret, Jeff. And if this is the secret that your listeners want to know, this is it. Your
Is-
audience will respect a position. You're the president. You're the CEO. You're the chief financial officer. However, they will fight in the street if they feel they know the person behind the position. And then what we have to think, Jeff, is not only what they listen, what do they see, internalize, and discuss after? So you can imagine people saying after, well, maybe the strategy does work. After all, our president's been studying strategy since he was 14 years old. There's what you say and the subtext of what people know and discuss based on what you say. Then later in the presentation, he said, he was talking about corporate citizenship. And obviously, he was very, this was an important issue for him. And as you know, part of how you get other people to remember and be interested is in stories.
yes.
And you take a complex idea that could be corporate strategy and corporate commitment. And I said, How do you explain that to your children? And he said it was the day after Christmas, and I sat both my children down. And I said, you're very lucky children because you have generous parents and even more generous grandparents. And perhaps you'd like to take one of your gift certificates or one of your presents, and we'll turn it in, take the money, and we'll give the money to children who aren't as lucky as you are and don't have homes. He said, I was so proud of my 14-year-old son. He said, Papa, how much do I give? Because I could give you all of my savings and all of my pocket money and all of my Christmas presents, and it wouldn't be enough to make a difference. How much do I give? And this magnificent man said, oh, you never give it all. You just give enough that it hurts a little. Now, Jeff, that is such a simple story. And most people are either children of somebody and have children. And these are the simple lessons. Every time I write a check or fill in a credit card to make a contribution to a charity I support, I think, let's add another 50 or $100. It just has to hurt a little. And that's the power of a simple story. And so if you take something like corporate citizenship, which is so big and involved, and just take it down, this is just what it means. Not everyone's as lucky as you. Just give a little bit more than you might normally. And what a lesson to raise children on, let
Yes.
alone your associates. Yeah.
Yeah. So good.
Mm.
I love so much about that, and how you're pulling the story out, and so it's not this external script that they have to internalize, but
Exactly.
you're
So
asking,
it's
what is in
difficult
there
to,
that we
yeah,
can get out?
it's difficult to remember a script that somebody else wrote. Now,
Yes.
what I will do with a lot of my clients that I have to write speeches for them, I have, I'm a member of not only the National Speakers Association, but the Professional Speechwriters Association. And some of my poor colleagues, they start with a blank piece of paper and have to write speeches for people they never meet. I can't do that. What I do is I will interview people about the subject they're going to talk about, take the transcript, clean it up, send it back with put a story here, give me an example, how many was there. And so you collaborate and work with it. But as you see, Jeff, it starts with their own words. I'll clean
Yes.
them up, make them more specific, make it more dramatic, perhaps reorganize the sentence for drama. It's their words. It doesn't start with nothing. It starts with them. And so if you start early enough and conversationally start talk through what you want to say, then you can say to the marketing department, all right, what are the key messages you need? Because remember, this was an opening speech. This was not a technical demo. There'll be plenty of those. And it's just a matter of taking a high level, talk through it. I was staying with a speaker friend of mine a couple of weeks ago, and I was helping him with his presentation. And as we were talking, I kept saying, that's a LinkedIn post. That's a LinkedIn post. That's a new article. Just out of our conversations beyond what we were looking at what he said. It's connection. And what should a good conversation or presentation or even keynote be? It should be, it's not a conversation. However, it needs to sound conversational. And very often, I look at that sounds good, but it sounds written. Do you use that word when you're sitting at
Right.
the dinner table with your family, or if you're casually sitting around chatting with your team? And if they say yes, say fine, leave it in. But so often I see what I would consider highfalutin language that people don't normally say to sound more intelligent, or AI gave it to them, or it came from the marketing department. If it doesn't sound like you, how would you say that in your real language? And
Right.
it's also, if you look at phrases like think outside the box. Now, when I first heard that in the 80s from Mike Vance, who I believe was the first person who said it, that sounded brilliant. But now these phrases become cringeworthy because we've
Yes.
heard them for 40 years. So I'll say, I know what you mean by thinking outside the box, but how would you say that without using that phrase? And I believe, and again, if you if you wait till the last minute and you're under pressure, it's more difficult to be creative. The creative process is messy. Your
Yes.
presentation is going to be tidy, but you have to, talk out loud. Would this work? Well, how could you look at that from the point of view of your customer or the point of view of your prospect? Which leads to, if you want to know another secret, well, it isn't a
Yes.
secret because we're telling everyone. Technology leaders have brilliant statistics, and they're often embedded in their presentations. And I say, what is one of your most dramatic or interesting or surprising statistics? Bring it up to the beginning of your presentation. So let's just say you're introduced, or it's your, if there are several people, say, speaking to a prospect, when it's your turn to get up, you don't say, good morning. Don't ever thank people for their time. Thank them for the opportunity to be discussing how our services could well be what you're looking for, but you don't thank them for the time. But if it's your turn to speak, whether you're the first or the fourth on the program, you might walk up and give a statistic that would normally be in the body of your presentation, push it up, and then add an emotion. It might interest you to know that. It might surprise you to know that.
Mm.
It might shock you to know that. It might please you to know that. So add an emotion and include more you language. How often do we hear people say, I'm going to talk about? No, they
Right.
don't care about you as much as themselves. So thank you for the opportunity to discuss how now is it make it about them, because very often when you're talking to a group of investors, they know something about you and you know something about them. It's how is this going to be a big good investment rather than why your widget is better than everybody else's. how
Right.
so what do they want to know from you? Is this going to be a good investment? What are the chances? What's your background to be able to prove it's a good investment? And you need to get their attention in the first few seconds, which a lot of people waffle. So, shall we review, Jeff? Conversationally talk through your presentations. Don't sound the same as everyone else. Get rid of the hackneyed cliches language. Don't kind of a sort of way you to success. Speak in black and white. Always think as an audience advocate. What do they need to know? And then how can you reinforce your points with short, personal, real life stories that help people see you as a person, not just a brilliant engineer with a big idea?
Ever notice how every leadership book tells you to take the journey, but none really show you the map? Well, after scaling multiple companies to over 260 million in combined revenue and working with over 1,000 leaders, I discovered the key difference that separates leaders who burn out from those who build unstoppable momentum. It's not strategy, not charisma, it's not even luck. It's relationships, specifically four of them. My new book, The Captain's Keys, reveals the stability matrix, a proven system that transforms leadership from survival into sustainable success. Inside, you'll discover the 4 critical relationships every leader needs and exactly how to build them. You can get your copy at thecaptainskeys.com, Amazon, or your favorite bookstore, and it's available in print, ebook, and audio. You don't need another playbook. You just need the right people in your boat. Well, I think the strong opening is essential, and you touched on that. What is it that makes an opener that grabs attention, creates that connection, and then kind of sets the tone for the rest of the speech or the presentation?
Well, there are so many options. For example, for technology presentations, I always love an interesting statistic or little known fact with the emotion. And very often, openings are really 3 different options. So you might begin with an interesting statistic, and then you might ask them a question. And there are 2 ways to ask questions. It could be a rhetorical question. If I were to ask you, now, in my world, I might say, if I were to ask you, is 2025 the year you double the quality of your presentations? Might
Mm.
say yes, might say no. Most likely, you would say, Patricia, I would love it to be. Can you tell me how? Well, welcome to. So, you see, I might give you a statistic about, according to the Wall Street Journal, executives who can speak without notes make 74% more than those who can't. Now, that's an
Wow,
old statistic from years ago, but I never forgot it. So you can start with
it's
a
a good one.
statistic, you can ask them a question, and then you can welcome them to what you're saying. Or you might tell a story, and from the story say, can you relate to how I felt? And then you say is, since then I've learned, now give us a statistic. And then say, thank you for the opportunity to discuss how investing in our company could be exactly the investment you're looking for. In advance, you told us you need to know da 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 da. And whatever you want to say, you arrange around what they said they wanted to know. Rather than this is how you look at the old days we were talking about, this is who we are. All right, no, that's talking about what you want to say. You still want to put what you want to say in, but based on their agenda, their interest, their challenges, or their opportunities, whatever word is more appropriate. And here's another. We speak to be remembered and repeated, ideally, because if you're giving any type of investor presentation, sales presentation, or even having a casual conversation sitting next to someone on a plane, it's all public speaking, Jeff.
Yes.
That that's saying, I'm on the way to our board meeting. This might be of interest. We speak, if you can speak in shorter sentences, phrases to give people time to think, oh, that makes sense. You give some illustrations. Now, stories can also be using visual words. We use words to communicate, but very often our audience remembers what they see when they listen to us. The French Open, talking to my children.
Yes.
Pictures, you can see yourself. Now this has nothing to do with investor presentations, but is the quality of words. I was helping a lawyer with a presentation on modern day slavery, which unfortunately is a much bigger problem than we would ever
Yes,
think in our everyday life.
it is.
And I said, you have to tell your message from the point of view of a man, a woman, and perhaps a couple. And in the context of her speech, she was telling a story, and she said he promised her many things. And we've seen enough Law and Order episodes. We know okay, the
Yeah.
situation. And I said, oh, no, he didn't. He promised her a life of romance and adventure. And in those two words, you get more information and pictures, and you understand in that moment why that young woman would leave the safety of the home to go off with this man. I am known for a phrase: specificity builds credibility. So
That's
you
good.
kind of, sort of, sure. For example, my number one question of all my clients is, if it weren't a thing, what would it be?
Oh, that's gold right there.
One of my brilliant engineers, we were rehearsing his presentation. He said there are two things people love about his product. And I said, if they weren't things, what would they be? He said, innovative upgrades. I said, there are billions of people in the world. What people love your innovative upgrades? He said, systems administrators. I said, who's in your audience? 80% are systems administrators. So, Jeff, my friends say, how can you help people speak when you really don't understand what they're talking about? This way, by
Yes.
helping them make their words more powerful, more descriptive, more persuasive, so that people can think, yeah, innovative upgrades. Yeah, let me sit up straight. I want to hear about the innovative upgrades. That's why my company sent me this conference. Or not rocket science, but overlooked, because people are too busy. They think, I know my subject, I just can wing it. Well, yes, you
Right.
can, but is it as effective? I can't sing a note. I could read, I could learn the words of a song, but that doesn't mean I could sing. So knowing your topic does not mean you can be powerful and persuasive without some work.
That's really good. And I think, just what you said earlier, just about the stories, and that they don't have to be these big, elaborate things. They don't have to be huge. And I think a lot of times it's the
Yeah,
very relatable
yeah,
stories, like the French Open, 14 years old.
yeah,
It's the conversation with the kids, give till it hurts just a little bit. I mean, those things are very relatable. And
yeah,
I think that that's the kind of
yeah,
storytelling that audiences
yeah,
remember, they repeat, and it sticks with them
yeah.
instead of this, big elaborate story about something that nobody else has ever done.
Yeah. Well, then it would be, uh, there are different types of stories. And one, if you're going to be persuasive, whether you're selling a concept or you're selling a product or you're selling your service or you're selling on why you're better than your competition that they're already doing business with. One great story technique is what your happy customers say.
Mm,
And then there's
yeah.
also the, how did you come up with the idea of what you created your company around? You know, and this is when you do some time travel. If you're talking about your origin story, and origin stories are now very popular, almost buzzwordy.
Yes.
But, take us to the garage, but take the audience. So, Jeff, I wish you could have been there. It was 2000, and we were locked down, but my friends and I used to meet in Zoom and talk about what we were thinking. Take me to a scene, tell me the story. So,
Right.
but bring the audience in. I wish you could have been there. Let's go back to 1996. You're bringing them, so you're telling your story, but they feel they're with you. And then there's the story of the happy customers or the happy investors. But and I recommend we follow a formula: situation, solution, success. So the situation. So let's just say you're talking about a customer. that has been with you for years. We all say, "Can you give me a reference?" That's the type of person you're going to tell the story about.
Sure.
And stories shrink time. And people always laugh when I say this. Stories have to be true. They do not have to be 100% accurate. Because let's just say you are a sales professional who is bringing in your brilliant engineer to do a demo. Now, the chances are this conversation has been going on for 4 or 6 months before you have the conversation. But in the story, to shrink time, you say, I picked up the phone and Jeff said, I am the senior vice president of, and now clearly articulate their problem. Now, they might not have known what the real problem was, or they just know we can't do this, or
Right.
yeah. But in the story, it's they call and over the phone tell you their backstory. We haven't had the pleasure meeting, but I heard you're the guy to talk to. I'm the senior vice president of, or I'm the chief information officer of, and this is our problem. Then the solution is, so what we did for Jeff is what we do for all our clients. We go through this 3-step process. And after the demo, let's do a test. That's the solution. That's in your words. So the help is in the now happy customer when you first met them. The solution is what you did. And then the success is in the now happy customer's words. Just last week I spoke to Jeff and he said, Patricia, I would not have believed it possible that in 3 months, not only did you solve the problem, our engineers love it, we have had no call outs after hours for help. And we've gained 3% market share. We couldn't have done it without you.
So good.
Now, don't you think you could take this story you're training your sales professionals to use and put it in your keynote speech or put it in your investor presentations? See,
That's
this is
brilliant.
why you need to share these great stories with everyone. People bring me in to give consistency to their message. And I say, look, you have monthly or weekly meetings. Just make sharing my biggest win or what I learned or this is a question I was never asked before. How do you want it to answer it? You don't need a speech coach to collaborate and learn from each other.
Oh, that's really, really
Yeah.
smart. Very easy to implement, very practical.
Yeah.
I think a lot of SaaS founders lean on metrics, and you mentioned this a little bit earlier, and maybe even start with that. How do they wrap insights in narrative so that people remember and act on what they share instead of just giving statistics or metrics?
All right. Well, the metrics and the statistics get your attention and reinforce what idea you're trying to make. And then you focus language. You're very aware of how AI is affecting us all. And let's be honest, nobody knows exactly where it's going to go. All right. However, we've come up with, all right, so it's part of the story. And give your audience credit for being smart if they are. So, for example, you're never going to say, I'm going to talk about, you say, if they're smart investors, you say, thank you for the opportunity to help you better understand how. Don't say, I'm going to teach you or I'm going to talk about, help you better understand. You're a smart person. That's why you see the opportunity. And one technique I suggest is when you're doing the review, you're getting their attention, you're focusing on what it is they want to hear. you put your company story within it. So whereas in the old days they said we've been in business for 36 years, you say is so you're saying you want to know this. Well, based on our 36 years experience, we have. So you're telling them what you want to tell them in an order of what is it you want to know. And you need the security of knowing. We didn't just come up with this last week. In our 36-year history, we've evolved from this to this to this. So it's subtly putting in what the old-fashioned salespeople might have done in a modern way and including it. And then, yes, when you do your review, because how do you get people to remember and repeat what they've said? You remind them what you've heard. They say, and then you close a presentation or an important conversation with, I would say, a rhetorical question based on the premise. So what is the big idea? So in our executive's case, it might have been, how do you know this is a brand new company? You've heard the strategy. You've heard how we're committed to support our customers in the community with our corporate citizen program. And so you're doing the review, but what you might say, don't forget to tell your leadership or your colleagues or who else don't forget to tell them, you do your review. So you are building in, you are reminding people, yes, you were here for this conversation, this presentation. However, make sure you share it with other people. And that, Jeff, is when you speak to the audience of your audience. Your message is getting to people you're not going to meet. But this is
That's
another
great.
reason you have to simplify your message so they understand it. And the takeaway, and to share with your engineering team, we have the special report. So you can put your graphs and more statistics. So anyone who wants to go deeper has got it there. You can then put, you might have told a couple of stories about satisfied clients. In the lead behind, you can put 10. You can do a 1 page on the company history that might have been 2-minute story, but it's more a timeline. This is another mistake people make. They take this great 16-page leave behind, or what the legal department, or some department, you don't have to put that all in your presentation. What you do with your conversation and presentation is give them enough information and visually see almost why you're so excited and why there's a really important place for what it is the idea that you have, that you're making great strides. And with an infusion of $20 million, can you imagine the impact this would have? The first trial, let's do it in California. When it works in California, we can take it to your location in India, in Europe. So
Really
when you
good.
talk to your leadership, remember to tell them, or your board of directors, remember to tell them da 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 da. Again, thank you for the opportunity to
Great.
present how our idea might be very important place in your investment portfolio, or whatever is appropriate. And then say, and remember, now this, just don't say thank you. And this is with all the engineers I help. They've always got a thank you slide. I say, what a pathetic slide. You've got to thank them for something specific. Thank you for your confidence and loyal support. Thank you for your interest in this new product. Thank you for your well thought through questions. Thank them for a specific and then say, remember. And then that last phrase is what I call your last words linger. It's
Mm,
not a new idea. It's the key idea from your presentation. And I say to, if your audience remembers one phrase, if they were going to tattoo it on their wrist, if you were going to use it in the signature line of your email, what would it be? And you might step forward to deliver your last words linger. Now, if this is so good, and here are 3 specific last words lingers I deliver for sales presentations with clients.
love it.
So with one, and this was the big player in the industry, big player. And it's going to cost you more, it's going to be slower to do, but we're never going out of business. So
That's good.
their last words linger was, remember, 157 profitable quarters. In other words, there might be a recession coming, but we're not going out of business. You don't invest in a company that's going out of business. Now, if it's their competition, I'm a boutique firm. So for somebody who's a small player, who's fighting against the big competition,
Right.
would be, remember, we're large enough to handle all your needs. We're small enough that you will always be a VIP client, and you will have the president of the company's cell phone that you can call 24/7.
That's good.
That's hypnotized. And then for another, it was, remember, 97% of the Fortune 100 do business with us. So those are real live last words linger.
Oh, that's great. Well, if people want to get hypnotized, how can they contact you online? Where can they find you
Well,
and
what
learn
I
more?
would do is go to fripp.com. At the top right, there's a contact us button and you can write to me. There's free resources. We have special reports on how to moderate panels, the 11 mistakes salespeople make in their presentations, and so much more. And you can email me from there. You can click on Fripp VT, which is virtual training. There are over 1,000 blog posts. You can go and do a search what you want information on.
Outstanding.
So I do answer my own emails. Will you ask Patricia? No, you wrote to me. I'm answering myself.
That's great. That's rare. And I think that's awesome. We'll make sure and link that in the show notes. Patricia, it's been an absolute pleasure. So much gold today. So thanks for being on SaaS Fuel.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks again, Patricia, for coming on the show and sharing your insights and resources. You can learn more about Patricia and her consulting at fripp.com. As always, all links, highlights, resources, and full show notes are available at saasfuel.com. And check out our YouTube channel as well. It's at Champion Leadership on YouTube. Lots and lots of resources over there for you. Thought leaders share. Share this episode with someone who still sends you articles and book recommendations. Hey, it's your turn to return the favor. Everyone who shares this week gets a magic deck blessed by Gandalf himself, guaranteed to slay any pitch meeting with wizard grade storytelling. Don't hoard the wisdom, share it like you're casting a growth spell. What happens when a fintech founder scales from 0 to 30,000 clients without a single line of code? That's pretty amazing. Next up, we have Raul Pangam, founder of Rapid Canvas and XVP at PayPal. He shares how no code AI is reinventing fraud prevention and powering billion-dollar adoption. After that, 1 week from today, we have Stacy Bishop, who spent 25 years on the front lines of fintech sales and now helps founders win more deals, discount less, and build go-to-market motions that stick. I will see you next time, and as always, enjoy the journey.
Thanks for listening to SaaS Fuel. Full show notes for each episode, which includes a summary, key takeaways, quotes, and any resources mentioned, are available at saasfuel.com. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're enjoying the content and getting value from these episodes, please leave us a rating and review at ratethispodcast.com/SaaSFuel. We'll be sure to read these out on future episodes.